Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Welcome to the Free Money Podcast. It's where we bring you the Brooklyn Bay Area consensus about institutional investing that you desperately crave. No more ASMR this week.
Isn't this the show where we eat spicy hot wigs and they get so hot that we end up crying?
I do want an investment management version of that, like where it's like, you know, you get portfolio managers interviewed while eating a succession of increasingly spicy
I
foods.
actually love that. I forget what it's called. What's that show called, actually?
Is it Fear Factor? No, that's eating spicy.
That is a little different. But I do love watching these famous people eating the spiciest things on earth. But anyway, this is the year end, Sloan. This is this year
It's the
is
year end,
finally,
yeah.
It's finally over.
I mean, I was asking you earlier, like, would you say anything big happened this year? Like,
One or two. Yeah.
Tiger King. We had Tiger King.
Yeah, I've become like fairly adept at prison style workouts. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean that's important. That's a life skill, really. I've been really good at just seeing what's on the streaming networks, I think. But yeah, like I think this is the year where like jobs became like the new must-have, accessory for everyone, and like we just really got to see like how much of a crapshoot America really was.
Absolutely. For those tuning in from the year 2084, this year at review is the end of the year 2020, which was a dog's breakfast of ridiculous events. We're trying to put together an end of the year episode here, the end of the year, rehash that isn't just pessimistic and dark, because there is, a lot to be pessimistic about, or at least very sad about, but that's not the intent here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of, I actually, and, dear listener, believe me, I actually do have a good news segment coming at the end of
which I'm thrilled
this
about.
Brief introduction, but yeah, I mean, it was something of an ordeal, but I managed to find some. But one of the big questions I wonder about for this is like, how much will we be talking about this in 20 years? Like the Spanish flu was like a comparable period. And definitely it seems like right after it, you had the flapper era and all of this like crazy, kind of social change. But it doesn't seem like anybody was like actively referring to the Spanish flu after it.
That's
after
a really
it passed.
good point. I mean, I think in the world that we're like focused on, which are like these big giant investors, I think this will be profoundly important year because, as you know, and listener, that these organizations don't change without crises. And in fact, that was like one of the topics I wanted to talk about, which is like, what are the triggers for change that we've learned? Well, if the trigger for change is a crisis, then 2020 will go down as the year that began so much change in this 100 trillion pool. Mm-hmm. They're going to change their technology. They're going to change how they do financial projections, where they get their assumptions, capital market assumptions, all these different things I expect will come from new sources and be constructed and utilized in new ways. And we'll be able to point back to 2020. But that's a very specific niche. I think you're asking a broader question around society. Like, how will we think of this?
Well, I think the niche, though, is a good place to hang out because, like, one of the I'm pretty sure on this podcast we talked a while ago about there was this impression after the Great Recession recovery that and to some degree a lot of institutions had wasted a crisis. Right? Like they had this profound impetus for change. Like we had to rethink everything all of a sudden. And it was, in what way is this different, do you think?
I mean, I think like there was a pent up, the thing that was neat about the GFC was like, we realized that we were building portfolios based on these like archaic categories called products. We were building investment portfolios based on equities and fixed income. And what the GFC like smashed into our brains was like, that doesn't provide diversification in a way you thought. And so you got to build these risk factors. It also, to give credit to the plans, was like this realization that financial services is largely dysfunctional, and that you could probably do some of this investing stuff on your own. And by the way, like I think that's been like relearned in this crisis, as like most people I think now realizes that the black box inside of hedge funds, and 90% of the time, like when you open up that black box, you just see jazz hands, like
really nice PowerPoints, jazz hands, like in
exactly
PowerPoint form.
like
Yeah.
Most of the IP in hedge fund black boxes, jazz hands is a t-shirt that I think 7 people need to be wearing. So I think like that crisis that we had, there was that pent up demand to think about portfolios in a new way. Now there's this like pent up demand to get with technology. Like we got driverless cars, we got private enterprises like landing spaceships on space stations, and like we're still using that like 4,000-year-old technology that the Babylonians were using to like model our pension portfolios. So this is the moment I think where we get technology. And I know I wrote a frickin' book on this.
Are you literally talking your book right now?
Literally. I don't know if you knew this, Sloan, but I am a selling author. It's not best, but I am selling.
Yeah. You've sold over one book.
I'm. It's in English, one language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, translated into one language. Yeah.
Well, I mean, hey, for a finance book, that is an achievement to actually be in English.
Yeah, and for I think one day when all the back orders hit, I was number 1 on Amazon Finance, and then it quickly disappeared from that page. But I did grab a screenshot for posterity.
Yeah, then it went back. What do you remember what overtook you?
Oh, it was like something about Toyota. It was like some Toyota guy. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Gotcha. It wasn't like the Warren Buffett way or something like that.
Anything about Warren Buffett.
Yeah, exactly. The Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett. I mean, I think one of the things that was really crazy to me this year watching, I mean, like, I think something that a lot of listeners may not really think about that much, but, like as a trans person, I know a lot of people who do sex work, and like, it just happens to be, a thing that happens in the community. Not everyone has that much access to, solid professional opportunities. And one of the big channels that people, have long used in that community is this thing called OnlyFans.
Tell me what that is, because I feel like I feel like I've seen the videos, and it's like, get on my OnlyFans, like, but I've never even been to the website.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sure you haven't.
Tell me, what is this OnlyFans thing you speak of?
Yeah, so OnlyFans.com, eh? Wow, this is the first time I'm hearing of it. Basically, the idea, it's kind of like Patreon, or other sites that are like kind of creator-centric, where you have a relationship with an individual performer, and like they create customized content for you. So at various levels of membership, you might have like the I talk directly to you member, for $150 a month. And then there's like, you can just see some private photos and private stuff. So it's the interesting thing about OnlyFans though. I mean, I think they paid out $2 billion in 2020. To creators, right? And the reason I bring it up on this podcast is because it got me thinking about financial advice and the way we pay for it. Because like, we're not necessarily used to thinking about financial advice in this way, but it's really a performance piece a lot of the time. And there is this like newsletter industrial complex. I don't know, probably know Agora Financial and, all of these other places that are making just, I think Agora did $2 billion in revenue not too long ago. They got sued and the stuff came out. So, It's not or a comparison that anyone really likes, which is weird because sex workers are honest and lovely people. And you would think that investment professionals would want to compare up.
That's awesome.
But, yeah, I mean, like, hey, it's
Right.
the oldest profession, right? Where people are like constantly doubting whether the investment profession is one or not. But I guess, both will screw you, but only in one case do you have to pay extra for that.
But
Thank you. But
yeah.
long way of working up to my punchline.
This is where we launched the free money OnlyFans.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm sure we'll be on there before too long. It's now like totally been gentrified as a thing. Like a lot of celebrities have gotten on it and have just been selling like, hang out with me type stuff. I think Vice just launched a channel on OnlyFans, which is a pretty good sign that it's not going to be just for porn anymore. Pretty soon.
I do love where you took this conversation, which is like, look, there was a time when finance was like this personal trusted thing, right? And like, you built a relationship with the person, that was helping you manage your money. And so, maybe that medium where there's videos, there's interpersonal contact, all that kind of stuff is some hybrid between, that robo advisor and the old world where you kind of showed up live in front of somebody's office. And so this OnlyFans kind of a platform is a way to get that interpersonal connection around your portfolio and your goals and your objectives. I'm really working this one.
I mean, I think you're like, it's funny. I laugh at the comparison, but you're totally right. Like there is like, what is the Dave Ramsey show? Right. Dave Ramsey will, he has seminars, he has books, he has all of these different, levels and tiers of contact that you can interact with. He's also apparently like, not the greatest person. I think there was a bunch of COVID stuff. Like I think he had COVID cases and made people come to the office still. Which is,
frowned upon.
Like, even in free money, even here at like, we're pretty money centric here at Free Money. And, we didn't make our many staff go to the office.
Nope. We should probably create some fake staff member to, so that we can claim somebody else is doing all the work in the background. That's right.
Kevin the intern.
Well, I like that idea. I mean, it's interesting. It kind of leads me, if you don't mind. I mean, I know you've got your good news segment coming up, but why don't I?
I mean, that's at the end. That's the D. To D get in the vibe. That's a vibe rescue
before
package.
We eat our final hot wing. It kind of reminds me of one of the things I wanted to mention was like, I've been studying these organizations for like 20 years, and you'd think I'd have this realization that I'm going to share with you far long ago, but it's like why bureaucracy exists inside pension plans and sovereign funds and endowments. And like when you get into these organizations, you're often just blown away at the level of bureaucracy. Like if you go to CalPERS, they won't even give you a cup of coffee because they're worried that like if they give you coffee, they're currying favor with you in some way, And so like
so they curry disfavor instead.
Actually more like you're going to make me put a quarter in a machine. And anyway, so the bureaucracy, it's like flashed over me this year, is really about compensating for a perceived level or an expected level of incompetence and a lack of discipline. So like the people who designed these organizations in the beginning were like, well, let's wrap them in bureaucracy because there's no way that great people will want to work here. And there's no way that they'll have discipline. And so I often think of it like, and by the way, they're wrong. They were wrong because there's a lot of great people that work at these places. But like, that's why it exists. It's like Odysseus, shoving wax in his sailors' ears and tying them to the mast so that, they just carry on and they don't hear the song of the sirens and turn the boat and crash into the rocks. It's the same with the pension fund bureaucracy. It's about preventing terrible mistakes and avoiding the catastrophes that are clearly out there in this world of finance without ever giving kind of autonomy to the people sitting on top of these plans. But the problem with that, and I've been thinking about this a ton because I'm trying to help these plans change. That's like most of what I do. The problem with that is if you're tying them to the mast, you can't do anything. You can't, you've defined the problem as the sirens and their song. But what happens if the problem's coming from somewhere else? It's,
but like, it seems like a pretty resilient, like a pretty, like, in April, people would be sitting around going like, you haven't even reacted to the COVID problem. Oh my gosh. But then by June, if you reacted to the COVID problem, you're an idiot.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. What if you were tightly rebalancing around all this? And I bet you could have made a lot of money,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you were, you could buy some nice stuff, I guess. But, if you did nothing, it worked out pretty okay.
It worked out great. You did better than most. You did better than most, Robin Hood traders maybe, or, people on Betterment. But the challenge I have is like, it's pretty clear that we're going to need these organizations to change in some way, shape, or form for them to like unlock their capital to solve big problems in the world. And yet we've built this philosophy, which seems to be working, as you say, around tying our teams to the mast and just like trying to be long-term by doing nothing. But like being long-term is not necessarily synonymous with doing nothing. Being long-term is about understanding, what's a fair price over the long run and tilting your portfolio in and out of that in a dynamic way. Patience isn't just about like having low turnover in a portfolio.
I mean, although it does remind me of there's this study, a study people often cite. It doesn't exist. It's
okay.
In the finance blogosphere, I think it was like the myth goes that Fidelity did a study of all their portfolios to see which ones were the highest performing by characteristic, and they found that the highest performing portfolios were the debt investors because they're hilarious. All frozen. And there are findings like that exist, but I haven't seen, like, I don't think that particular finding actually winds up existing in that dramatic a fashion. I'd love to be corrected by a listener.
That's fascinating.
But
well, in a world where like dead people outperform sentient, living people, like tie these people to the mast. But in a world where like human beings can have an impact, a positive impact, and not just a negative impact. Like the path to getting out of this like bureaucratic sclerosis is to hire competent and disciplined people and then like create a system that empowers them in certain delegated areas to go off and pursue their objectives. And ultimately, like, that's the world I keep trying to envision, where like boards of directors at pension funds, they like have the systems in place, the data in place to have proper oversight. And they have people with incredible insight. And you can have both of those things functioning and have it functioning over this long horizon. But I just always end up running into that bureaucratic part. And so like, that's for me, it like this year was about like, first of all, like understanding how we change the organization. And I can come to that in a second, but it starts with like understanding why we did this. Like, why did we design these funds like this? And it was really about avoiding catastrophe. And
you're really drawing a distinction between doing nothing because you don't know what's going on and not acting rashly beyond the limits of your knowledge.
Yeah, like as individuals, we have like endless freedom to go do whatever we want, but we don't have, it's not like we have a smart process, Like when I buy and sell stuff in my 401k, like I can tell you the process is like 14 seconds long, and it's like based on like some ridiculous, inspiration I get out of a daily news item. Like as the person who's designing investment organizations, you will be astounded to see how bad my own investment decisions are. But the good news is I mostly buy passive indices. So it's going okay for me, Sloan. Don't worry about me.
Yeah, I know. I was just talking about this with my girlfriend. We're the same way. Like, she's a way better investor.
It's like, and
than
here
I
we
am.
are. Like, here's how you build the process. And then it's like,
Yeah,
whoa,
yeah.
that thing seems like it's too high. I'm going to sell it. Terrible.
Yep. I actually bought something off of a tip during the COVID pandemic, and it worked out well. It was a great,
stock tip.
Great tip to buy a real. Yeah, it was a real estate investment trust anchored by grocery stores.
Very nice.
Hot tip. Very, but yeah, it's very. It's amazing how what expertise will actually get you, and
That's right.
It really is.
What's next?
One of my big themes for this year is like this kind of like perceiving is believing kind of thing, where like so neurologically, like as a ski racer, this is a big thing for us. Every ski racer will sit down, close their eyes, and visualize the course as they're
Right.
prepping to run it. And neurologically, there's evidence that is about the same as actually doing it, right? So in other words, we perceive thinking about the thing, thinking about doing the thing, and actually doing the thing very, very, very similarly. And like as I was I came across that at the Noguchi Museum and was reminded of it, and started that really, to me, is a lot about the way that we've been responding to the social justice, the diversity, all the various calls for change that we've had over, especially since the summer, since the killing of George Floyd, since all that. There is tremendous impetus to do something, but the something that we are able to do is really just thinking about doing something, right? The something that most organizations have done is issue a statement, which is like, kind of, it's alarming, I think. And like I think to the free money readership, or listenership, like it's important to underscore that the problems we're talking about have not been solved, and that listening to free money does not solve the problem.
It's 98% of the way there, if we're honest.
That's true. Yeah, it's
do not.
But the other 2%
free money is my message, because that money is supposed to be freed, and you could have some. You could have, that's true. Yeah, the free money giveaway is finally is coming. Look,
soon.
I think your point, Sloan, which is like this realization that I keep having as well. It's why I just was talking about bureaucracy and how do we unravel it. Is like, how do we move these organizations beyond the statement? And so for me,
like what the hell do we do?
Yeah, so for me, it's like, why do we need to change? Like, there's the George Floyd that's like revealing the bias. There's the fires in Napa revealing the climate risk. There's the COVID volatility that revealed the lack of technology in these organizations. There's so many crises going on that you can't help but sort of say to yourself, when are we actually going to make change? And so like, that's the work I've been trying to focus on this year, which is like not why or even how, because I think I wrote a different book. I'm talking my other book now, which is like you can collaborate in these entities through collaboration with others, and you can pool resources and do all this great stuff. But it's that when do we actually reallocate people, resources, scarce anything to something new. And in this space, it's incredibly hard because of the fact, I know I've said this before, but I'll remind everybody, most of this big $100 trillion has a monopoly over their assets. So they're not going out of business.
Yeah.
Right. So there is no, hey, like people are going to leave if we don't take this seriously. No, like you're staying in business. Like in Australia is the counterexample. One of the super funds was sued for not taking climate change seriously. And guess what? That had like knock-on effects on all the other super funds who are now saying, how do we avoid getting sued? And so like,
whereas in the States, we're still like, how do we pretend that we know how to do ESG?
Yeah, which we don't. We don't. Like, how do we pretend that we actually integrate ESG when really we're setting up a separate team so that we don't have to. Which, by the way, takes me to my final big idea. But let's go to Europe.
I was hoping you would go there.
All right.
No, I want to talk resilience, because my last one is my bad vibe.
Okay, so my final thought for the year. So obviously there's like, we have this bureaucracy, but we need change. So those are my kind of first two things. What do we change into? Well, I think like the big thing missing in the institutional investment landscape today is this notion of portfolio resilience, and specifically a new investment function inside long-term investment organizations that focus on resilience. And in my world, resilience will require three teams coming together into a single team. The first is data, the second is risk, and the third is ESG. So data, you get your data in a format that is usable. You've cleansed it, it's normalized, you can like drill down into it. That data will power all sorts of reporting. It will facilitate projections, cash flow, liquidity, all that. Get the data organized. In the same team, then that data flows into risk systems. Risk systems is that short-term volatility, the value at risk, the understanding your tracking error, all those things that are kind of current day risk metrics. And then let's add ESG, which is also often alternative data, but that is the pre-financial risk, I would call it. This is the stuff that becomes risk when you take a long enough time horizon. Now, you combine data with traditional financial risk and ESG, and you start to get really remarkable insight about the portfolio. And that is what's so powerful about this notion of portfolio resilience. Too many people think of investment risk as just oversight. Let's make sure that we're overseeing the portfolio. But the risk function should also be insight, right? What is it about our portfolio? Are we allocated correctly? Is this asset mispriced? And that's true of ESG as well. Yes, we want to have oversight, make sure we're not, using slave labor in China to make our, products, which was in the news today. But we also want to make sure that we're having this like remarkable insight that helps us outperform. And so this notion of portfolio resilience, it kind of is like long-term risk-adjusted return focused rather than short-term. And it means data, risk, and ESG.
I think this is profound.
Yeah, I think we'll see some funds doing that this year. Like I have special information on one that I know is doing it, but I think there's a few more.
the free money tradition.
I know exactly. Look at great idea, but I know it's happening already.
Yeah. I have a feeling someone is going, but no, like I think like this is one of these, there's so much philosophy that goes into investment management, and like to go and take the resilience approach rather than the risk approach, I think it's, at a cynical level, and most finance people in my experience are cynics. People will be like, "Oh yeah, you want it to come back up after it goes down? Wow, good,
good idea,
good idea." Yeah. But like, to me, like resilience, as I've talked to you a lot, is about what grows back, right? If it goes down, not about whether it goes back up, but about like the thing that happens in there. And that really is like, I think that can be as profound an observation as one allows themselves to really.
And don't go down as much, right? Like the power of not losing as much money as your peers is so important. Like, you should run some of the math of like, if your peer, like if you have the same, up years, but your down year is just a little bit less, your performance is going to really compound in a different way over 10, 15, 20 years. And you're going to look so much better. And it's going to be a function of that, that kind of downside protection. And everybody's like, oh, let's go to the jazz hand hedge funds, for that downside protection. That's a really expensive way to hedge, and I think this notion of portfolio resilience, data, risk, and ESG, I'll tell you, aside from the jazz hand hedge funds, that's mostly what hedge funds do. Hedge funds are data, like risk, and ESG. If ESG was just said the other way around, alternative data, which is what I think it is anyways, that's a hedge fund, you know? And so rather than paying a hedge fund to get it, let's build it internally, call it portfolio resilience, so you can get it through your board of directors.
Simply don't buy janky stuff.
Yeah, and take a longer time. You know.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing this catch on, and I mean, because like my last big theme for this year is like I am, remember Donald Trump in 2016 came out on the campaign trail and he was like, "America, you're going to be tired of winning by the time I'm done." And we were like, we've been number one in COVID case counts and death and mortality, like, and all kinds of stuff. In number of states that are on fire.
We're winning all these terrible categories. We're winning.
In like, I learned recently that there is a maintenance hole fire season in New York City. Where like, inevitably, in certain neighborhoods, the ground just catches on fire when water mixes with salt and goes down and hits the transformers. So like I'm working up to being able to express excitement for 2021. I mean, we've got a vaccine on the horizon. Like Joe Biden is quote unquote pro science, which I can't believe is an issue.
Yeah, people are getting the vaccine right now. Like I saw it this morning. I think we've had 2 million have gotten the vaccine.
By the time this comes out, probably 3 or 4.
That's right.
And like and that's outrageously good. And expectations for Joe Biden are in the toilet, right? I'm like, no one expects much of him at all, which is
that's the way I play my life. I'm always like, look, I'm bad at this. I'm real bad at this, and then people are like, he wasn't that bad. It's like beat expectations. That's all I ask for.
I guess his hair wasn't on fire during the meeting.
Do you think I could use Dr. Monk as a way of getting the vaccine earlier?
Oh man! Oh, I don't know. That's liable to get me canceled.
Exactly.
Look at this man. Although it's a real PhD.
I do use the doctor when I'm still to this day, even though it's actually never gotten me a first class seat on an airplane. But I will use doctor. And by the way, Dr. Monk, like, I got like the religious piece and the medical doctor piece. Unfortunately, I'm not living either.
There's like the TV show about you is like about a monk who like responds to crazy healthcare cases, like House MD, but with a monk.
But I do have a couple of good doctor friends that have already gotten the vaccine, like close friends of mine that have had the injection in their arms. And they're frontline medical workers. So it's obviously totally justified. But it is fun to like be that close to the solution. Like I am 1 degree separated from human beings that have had the vaccine. And it's like, I feel like the optimism creeping into my bones here.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's yes. And similarly, every time I hear about somebody like Claire's mom was scheduled to get the vaccine today, didn't, because she actually wound up getting, and so she's doing okay. She's recovering.
Sorry to hear that.
But there's optimism that is just sitting there in the wings, And I have stories to share. So I have 3 that are just like out there and weird, and then 3 that are actual legitimately good news. So the first one is that the Solomon Islands is banning Facebook entirely in the name of national unity. Imagine that. Like they're at war with Silicon Valley. Like, I mean, hey, that's like banning smoking in my mind.
Well, it's so funny. It's funny. Real quick on that one. I always feel like it's funny you bring up the smoking, because I always feel like, why do people still smoke? Like the only times I had an interest in smoking was like when I was embarrassed at a party, and yet now with your phone, you always look occupied and busy and rad. Whereas before you'd have a cigarette to be like, oh yeah, I just have to have the cigarette, It would give you something to do.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with Solomon Islands, but I do believe that people can use their phone instead of smoke cigarettes.
People on the Solomon Islands are just confident that they look cool.
That's true.
So the next story I have is that sandwiches in Subway were ruled too sugary to meet the definition of being bread. So in Ireland, this is the Subway sandwich.
Holy cow! That's shocking.
Like that. Yeah, exactly.
So it's cake. What do they call that then? Is it like a cake?
I don't. I mean, maybe it's just like paper, like additional wrapping. It didn't specify the replacement category, but it's not
fantastic. Bread.
Yeah. My last goofy one is an anti-gay Hungarian politician resigned earlier this month.
Oh, I saw this.
Caught by the police at a 25-man orgy, and subsequently fled through the window.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just, I mean, there's no justification. There's no way to defray being a bigot, but like, if you get called out in such a poetic way,
yeah.
I mean, it's just
it does feel like karma is a thing occasionally.
Yep. Bitch, you might say. But so like actual good news this year, the IEA, the Independent Energy Agency in the U.S., they put out an annual statistical book, and for the first time they said that solar is the cheapest form of energy. Not just now; it's the cheapest form of energy in history. Yeah, and like we were talking earlier, this is Trump's IEA. Like it's staffed with people who used to work in the oil industry. We cannot like underscore enough how big that is. That's a paradigm shift.
That's fantastic news. Because the sun is endless.
Yeah. And it's like, even from like startup costs now, if you're doing a new fossil fuel project, why? It makes sense to think about doing it solar. The last good news thing that I have is that Scotland became the first country this year to have universal free period.
Oh, wow.
First country in the world, which like we don't really think of as a civil rights issue all that often, but yeesh, what a big one. And what a win to have some movement on that.
Yeah, that's great. Seems, all hell.
So the vibes have been fixed.
Positivity's back. Good. That way we can go into our prediction just in time for our prediction.
Oh shit!
What's happening?
Yeah, I was trying to play the Dear Ashby horn, but I played the wrong sound effect.
What do you got?
That's the right one. Oh man, I should be put down.
Oh no, I love it.
So the first we have, obviously if in case this is your first episode.
I'm sorry,
which
they're not normally like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but I mean, I guess a good place to catch up with us. Usually we have guests or something, but we do on every episode have people write in with questions for Dr. Monk over here. Doctor. So the first question this week is, what is the most loco thing that's happened this year that you forgot about until answering this question?
I appreciate you sharing this question with me ahead of time so I could think of those loco things. The first loco thing, which I hadn't really internalized until this moment, was that I have not stepped inside my office at Stanford since February of 2019, which suggests to me there's some serious
February 2019?
2020, I meant to say. Don't tell Stanford. It's been a year and changed. No, there's probably something like alive, like growing out of my little mini refrigerator. So that's a little bit scary. And it's just wild to think that like life could pop up and like be that kind of pressing that you wouldn't even go back to the room that that's been my office for 10 years at Stanford. I was in there, 3 days a week for 9.5 years. And I left one day without even realizing I wouldn't go back. And I haven't been back. because it's a real pain in the ass to get onto campus right now. It's all these different rules. So that's the first thing that I thought was really surprising. The other thing that I find super surprising are all these electric bikes that look like bikes. So the thing I find very strange about that is you'll see some like old lady sitting very vertical, just hauling ass on what looks like a bike that she is pedaling, and you're just like, holy shit, that she is just hauling ass. And then you realize that it's an electric bike. It's basically a motorcycle for people that like want to keep a low profile. But then they don't end up keeping a low profile because they're sitting up like a vertical person doing 35 miles an hour. So that was the other thing that I think has been surprising for me this year. The trend of the new electric bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, those are so cool. In the city, the delivery guys are all over the place with those.
I mean, they're kind of like motorbikes, right? Some of them go pretty damn fast.
Oh yeah, 30 miles an hour, 30-ish. With the electric stuff, there's no lag from when you pull back on the accelerator to when you go. So those things really rip. The next question is, what dubiously plausible thing do you think could happen in 2021?
Well, with Biden, I think we might get universal health care for dogs.
Whoa.
For dogs. So this is more of a gripe. Do you know how expensive vet bills are? I have a dog.
Yes, I do.
Has dwarfism, and so that's the thing. And Megadog has dwarfism. Don't tell anybody. But somebody needs to figure out how to make cost-effective pet healthcare available that doesn't feel like predatory. Like every time I bring my dog in there, they're like super condescending, first of all. And second of all, it's like, look, you're probably going to need an MRI with like a 4-month course of antibiotics. And so like the sincere thing is I would love for some business to start in 2021 that like is a cost-effective way for people to like feel good about taking care of their pets. I'm not made of money. I can't spend $3,000 on an MRI for my dog, which is literally what was pushed at me about 6 weeks ago, an MRI for my dog. And in the end, we had to be the dicks and say, we can't afford that. And then finally, when we admitted that we couldn't afford it, they were like, all right, well, you could just treat it and see if that's what it is. And we did. And now Megadog is great. He's running around, So my hope for 2021, given some of the pain I had in 2020, was like, let's get some better healthcare options. I know that's not like what we were hoping. It would be great to have universal healthcare, but I don't think that's going to happen.
But this is Biden here. It's Biden, not Bernie. But the pet thing, it's really, it really does underscore just like what healthcare really is. Because if you don't have insurance, that's your experience in healthcare.
Yeah.
And like we have a great vet here in Park Slope, but like we have 2 10 and 12-year-old cats.
Probably expensive, right? To like keep them up.
Pretty expensive. And the vet's great too. Like Griffin had to go like maybe 3 months ago, and we showed up. He hates to travel. He shows up covered in his own piss.
Oh God!
And the vet calls us up and is like, "You have a very handsome cat." He also scratches the vet. So even
awesome.
with a great vet, it still sucks. So the last question of this year,
here we go,
is what would you say is the most amusing prediction of all time?
I'm going to make this one a little bit personal because I have to tell you, I have this prediction that I did that has been like weighing on me for 25 years. So when I was I played baseball in high school, and so I was a pitcher. And so I was pretty good at like seeing when a pitcher was like kind of sucking and like throwing like fastballs over the plate. And so I used to do this thing where like when I thought a pitcher was struggling, I would call home runs. And so like I'd be sitting in front of the TV and I'd be like, this one's gone. And I would like make a point of not doing it like every pitch, right? So like you do it once a game. And I would say like 4 or 5 times out of 50 tries, I was right. And it just so happens I was sitting at a party in college with like 25 of my friends. And I was having this feeling like this guy was about to give up a home run. And I called it just as he was about to throw the pitch. And I was like, this one's gone. And the guy hit a home run. And it was like, I thought it was going to be so awesome. And what's so funny, what's actually like stayed with me is like everybody was angry. You know, like there was like two of my friends were like in awe, and like 22 of them were like, shut up. Like you must have seen, you know, like nobody was like thrilled at my predictive capacity. Everybody was just like frustrated that either I had gotten it right or, you know, they wanted to know the secret. And so what it taught me was like, oftentimes, like there's not a lot of benefit to making predictions, you know, like you think you're going to be cool for being the one to make that prediction. Let me tell you from experience, like even in this little case, the person who guesses it, even if you guess it right, you know, they're mad. In fact, they're rooting for you to get it wrong. Like they would have loved it if I'd called a home run and no home run happened. They would be, you know, they would have really enjoyed it. And so there's not a lot, you know, unless you're making predictions and you're like investing behind them. I don't think there's a lot of benefit to like making these types of predictions that are filled with tons of uncertainty, unless they're like true projections that you're going to like put capital behind.
Yeah, I mean that's a great answer because like I mean you sort of there is this like tradition of putting out like I think the 10-year could cross 2% next year, you know, but like the you know the only people who really enjoy that I think are the people who do them. Not the audience, not the you know, not the rest of, you know, it's this they sort of get to pretend to be Nostradamus. And like there's no worse way to make friends than like something happening and you going around I told you so, I said it was gonna happen and it happened.
Like when I called that home run, it wasn't like people showered me with praise. It was like everybody was angry at me, you know? And so this realization that like projections are really only useful if they expand people's thinking. And I think they're useful when you're trying to think of like scenarios. So like, hey, what are the different scenarios that we could envision in the future? Well, this smart guy has predicted autonomous, you know, driving is going to be mainstream this year. And you're like, all right, well, what would that mean for my portfolio? I think that's valuable. But, you know, predictions that are short run, that don't have wider implications, I think that gets you into trouble and people are mostly rooting against you. Yeah.
Well, with that, I mean, like, I think I would say we've rescued the vibe. I mean, we had a vibe bailout.
I think 2021 is going to be awesome
for 20. I mean, we based. I hope so. I mean, for heaven's sake, I just want to get out on the dance floor again.
I know.
You know, like, and let's hope by this time next year we're able to, you know, I can be like, you know, so here are my top 3 nightclub dance tracks of the year, you know. And instead of us talking, let's be beeping music.
I did go ahead and make a reservation for a vacation in August. So that shows you the optimism I'm bringing into 2021. So by August, I'm hoping that we're kind of back to normal-ish.
There's one of my friends did the most finance guy thing ever, like based in Monaco. And he booked, I think 2 or 3 different ski vacations in different European jurisdictions at the same time. And you know, just to kind of try and get around the lockdown restrictions, and you know, it wound up failing, but he was totally
hilarious.
But yeah, I hope you're right. I mean, I just got a travel voucher that expires in October 2021.
All right, gotta use it.
You know, hey, we're on.
There we go.
Online.
All right, Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye.
I'm looking like money, 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 money. Now make it rain on them.